Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, welcome to our webinar this afternoon, applying for the Arts Learning Project Grant, Arts Learning Express Grant, and the Teaching Artist roster. I'm part of the grants team and I'm joined by the Arts Learning team today. We'll go ahead and introduce ourselves. My name is Stephanie Montgomery. I'm the Grants and Project Analyst in the Northern Office in Reno, but covering the entire state. If I could ask my colleagues to come on and introduce themselves as well.
Can you see me? Oh, there we go. Okay. Hi, my name is Shireen Chowdhury, and I'm the Arts Learning Specialist based in Las Vegas in our Southern Nevada office.
Hi everyone, my name is Sogyan Tabotaboy. I'm also an arts learning specialist based in our Northern Nevada office.
Thank you both. I was just looking to see if I could enable a setting right here. Okay, great. Okay, so we are here today to cover two of the grants that are in the Arts Learning Program area that Sogand and Shireen staff. And we're going to go over as well a program which is not a grant, but is directly related to our grants, the Teaching Artist roster. So first, I want to start out with kind of just some key information, some distinguishing features of all of these grants and programs. So you'll see to the left here, the Arts Learning Project, some details, just some kind of quick comparison between that and the Arts Learning Express grant. The Arts Learning Project grant, which is open as of this Monday, taking applications, is due by April 1st of this year by 5 p.m. sharp. The award amount is up to $7,000 with a 1-to-1 in-kind or cash match required. That is open to any nonprofit organization, not just an arts nonprofit, but any nonprofit that is doing an arts project, and also to public institutions. So you can think public schools, public libraries, public colleges. These projects for the Arts Learning Project Grant must take place in our fiscal year 26, which is July 1, 2025 to June 30th, 2026. And because it is specific to organizations, nonprofits, and public institutions, those entities must have what is called a unique entity identifier from SAM.gov, which replaced the DUNS number, if you're familiar with that. It just has to be assigned. It does not have to be active, but you do have to have that at the time of application. The Arts Learning Express grant, which is a little bit different. It doesn't have a regular due date and time. It is on a rolling basis. So anytime during our fiscal year, though I'll talk about the 2 cycles that we have, you have to apply at least 30 days before the proposed project. We have a pot of money. We spend that money down. Once that money is gone, where we no longer have the Arts Learning Express open in that particular cycle. Happy to talk more about that in the Q&A if that's confusing at all. This upcoming fiscal year, the award amount is up to $2,000 with no match required. That is a change from previous years where it was up to $1,500. This Arts Learning Express grant is open to nonprofit organizations, arts or non-arts that are doing an arts project. You have to be incorporated with the Nevada Secretary of State. In fact, that's also the case with the Arts Learning Project entities, the nonprofit entities. It is also open to public institutions. So again, public schools, public libraries, and this is what ties into the program that we're going to be talking about a little bit. It is open to those Nevada residents who are on the Nevada Arts Council Teaching Artist roster. So that roster, although it is not a grant itself, does allow you access to the Arts Learning Express grant, which is a pretty excellent opportunity to be able to do those short-term arts education programming. So those projects for the Arts Learning Express grant also have to take place during our fiscal year, but we have a cycle A and a cycle B. Cycle A is the first half of our fiscal year, July 1 to December 31st, 2025 in this case. So that's cycle A. So you would apply if you had a project happening during that time period, you would apply for Cycle A. Cycle B is the second half of our fiscal year, January 1st to June 30th, 2026. So be careful of the timing. Make sure that you are applying in the correct cycle. And then those organizations, nonprofits, public institutions must also have a UEI number in order to be eligible to apply. Okay. Okay, so compare this to the Teaching Artist roster, which again is not a grant, but is a program that grants access to the Arts Learning Express grant. The Teaching Artist roster will be due this year on October 22nd, 2025 at 5 p.m. sharp. It is open to individual artists that are either in Nevada or in a border state that are 21 years or older. It's also open to arts and cultural groups, even if they are informal groups that do not have 501c3 status. So if you are a group or an artist collective, you're eligible to apply for the roster. And it's also open to nonprofit arts organizations. So this application process, if successful, means that you will be included on the Teaching Artist roster directory, which you can see on our website. If you go to Programs, Arts Learning, Teaching Artist roster, you can see all of the teaching artists' profiles there. Which also means that other entities or organizations can find teaching artist roster profiles. And importantly, roster teaching artists as individuals can apply to Arts Learning Express grants directly. So it's a pretty big perk of being on the roster to have access to that source of funding. Okay, so if you are applying as an entity, as an organization of some kind, I did say a little bit already about some of the things you need to have prepared, but just to drill down a little bit and give a little bit more information on what that means. So if you are a nonprofit organization, you must be a 501c3, not another subchapter from the Internal Revenue Code. You must be a 501c3 that has federal tax exempt status, and we cannot accept fiscal agents. You have to be in good standing with the IRS. And you also have to have active incorporation with the Nevada Secretary of State. We check both of those things at the time of application. For public institutions, especially schools and libraries, it's important to know that you may apply independently as long as you have your own budget and facility. So even if you're within the same district or system, you can still apply independently if you have that kind of independent status with your budget and facilities. For colleges, there is a limitation on receiving more than one grant to the same academic department per fiscal year for these programs. So the Department of Music, for example, you would want to, talk to your colleagues, make sure that only one grant application is being put forward because you can only receive one. Projects from public institutions, colleges have to serve the broader community outside of the institution and generate area-wide arts involvement. Those grants may not support your internal programming, but rather an arts project, in this case, an arts learning project, or other arts education programming. And we should just note here, since we are talking about the teaching artist roster, that public institutions are ineligible to apply. So only individuals, groups, or 501c3s may apply for the teaching artist roster. And if you have questions as we're going through this, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. And we'll also have time for questions after we finish all of the slides. Okay, just a little snapshot for you. If you wanted to, take a screenshot of this, I'm also happy to share if it's helpful. But these are all of our FY26 grant offerings for organizations. As you can see, it's much more than just our two arts learning grants. We have a number of other grants for organizations, and you can kind of see the pairing for each one. You can hold different combinations of grants in the same fiscal year, but you'll want to be careful how you plan out your applications. You're welcome to apply to anything for which you're eligible, but you can only receive certain combinations of grants in the fiscal year. I have that same layout here for you for individuals. So if you are an individual artist, consider also these other grant and award opportunities. Again, they do have specific requirements. For example, the project grant for artists, you could not do arts education, but you could do your own artistic practice. And if you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out to us with more. And just once more, specifically thinking about those organizations, if you are affiliated with one, just a little table to give you an idea of how much money you could potentially qualify for on an annual basis, and the combinations of grants that you can put together. We've got a nice little table up here of what you can put together, though keep in mind that for the operating support grant that total dollar amount can vary based on your annual total revenue. And again, if you have any questions about that, we can talk about that in the Q&A. We do also have a couple of other webinars on our YouTube that I'll just, let you know about if you're interested in the operating support grant, the project grant for organizations. We have a webinar up on our YouTube, and likewise for the Artist Fellowship Award and the project grant for artists. So please be sure to check that out if you are interested in them, because we won't be covering them today. Okay, so the distinguishing features, what makes the Arts Learning Project different from the Arts Learning Express grant? Because they do have different intents and scopes. The Arts Learning Project, as we said, is open to any nonprofit or public institution with an arts-related project, whereas the Arts Learning Express is only open to individuals on the teaching artist roster, and nonprofit organizations and public institutions. Border states are allowed to apply for the Arts Learning Project with some stipulations. The majority of the project, 75%, must serve Nevada communities, and all awarded funds must support those activities in Nevada. That is not the case for the Arts Learning Express grant. That is not open to border states or non-residents. It's only open to organizations, public institutions in the state of Nevada. Another major difference is the Arts Learning Project grant is evaluated by panel review based on four different categories of criteria. Number 1, project design and content. Number 2, project management. Number 3, artistic excellence. And number 4, arts learning impact and artistic merit. Now, we will talk a little bit more about those later on, but I would say a big tip is to stick very, very closely to the review criteria to have a successful application. That is how the panelists will be evaluating your application. Now for Arts Learning Express, applications are evaluated internally on artistic excellence and artistic merit, and there is a pretty thorough breakdown of what it is that Nevada Arts Council staff look for successful applications for Arts Learning Express. If you look at the guidelines, there are specific criteria listed there for that internal review. For the Arts Learning Project, funds may only be used for teaching artist fees, production artist fees, materials and supplies, facility rental fees, and equipment relevant to the project up to $1,000. That is a little bit different than some of our other grants, so be sure that you are considering what are allowable expenses in your budget for the Arts Learning Project grant. For Arts Learning Express, and this is actually new this year, funds may be used for teaching artist fees, materials, supplies, and travel. That is only accommodation and transportation. Per diem or food or drink are not allowable expenses. So they are different, these two grants, in terms of who can apply, how they are evaluated, and what the funds can be used for. And we're going to talk a little bit too about the intent of both, in what situation you should apply for which. Now, the distinguishing features of the teaching artist roster, which again is not a grant, but is a program. It is open to those individuals, arts and cultural groups, nonprofits. Border state residents are allowed to apply, but they would not be eligible to receive the Arts Learning Express grant, unlike Nevada residents who are on the teaching artist roster. Those applications are also evaluated by panel review on artistic excellence, teaching artist merit, and community and/or education track specialization. So we have two different tracks in the teaching artist roster, and we can say a little bit more about that, but you can apply for one or both tracks. And I would encourage you to go online and look at the previous year's guidelines to get a sense of what this upcoming year will look like. So again, it's not a grant, but it does allow Nevada resident individuals to apply for Arts Learning Express grants directly without having to partner with a school or a nonprofit. So some examples of what those projects might look like. So the Arts Learning Project, that is intended to support arts learning programming, teaching artist residencies, and teaching artist training projects. Fund must be used for conducting group lessons and workshops that can be in person or virtual, and educational performances at schools or community facilities. That can be one activity or project or a series of related activities. An example might be that an entity applies for 8 different workshops and a field trip initiative, and then most of the project funds would be used for teaching artist fees and materials. So you could see it's workshops, field trip, in this case, kind of it fits into that group lessons, kind of hands-on workshop type project. The Arts Learning Express grant, on the other hand, is intended to support short-term arts education programming for 4 hours minimum to 20 hours maximum. So an example might be that a teaching artist that's on the teaching artist roster applies to teach a series of 4 classes of hands-on learning activities at a local county arts center. The hands-on part is a really big part of the intent of the Arts Learning Express grant. So be careful when you read those guidelines to pay attention to some of that language there. It does need to be a hands-on project. That artist might apply to use all of the $2,000 for teaching artist fees and provide the service at no cost to the recreation center. Okay, so we're going to drill down a little bit into the Arts Learning Project grant, that first grant, and I'm going to invite Shireen to come on and talk a little bit about the intent and scope of that grant.
Okay, hello. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for sharing all of that information. So I'm here to share about the Arts Learning Project Grant. The Arts Learning Project Grant is the biggest grant that we have in the Arts Learning Program area. And it is a grant that is up to $7,000. It does require a match, and that match can be in cash or it can be in kind. So if you are providing things like a venue or materials or volunteer support, all of that can be counted towards that $7,000 match. And the grant cycle for the Arts Learning Project is July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2026. And this grant actually just recently opened up this week. So we are accepting applications currently for the Arts Learning Project grant. The Arts Learning Project Grant is meant to support arts learning activities, teaching artist residencies, and teacher/teaching artist training to provide unique opportunities for students and people of all ages to work with practicing artists. Funds must be used for conducting lessons or workshops in person or online virtual, educational performances at schools or community facilities, or the execution of one activity or project or a series of related activities. Some components of the project, including planning, may occur outside of the fiscal 26 grant cycle, July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2026. However, the portions of the project being paid with ALP funds must occur completely within the grant cycle. So as it says here, we see all sorts of different types of educational projects with the Arts Learning Project grant. It is quite flexible in how it can be used, but one of the main things that we like to remind people to consider is that we really emphasize that hands-on art making time with a group. So just make sure for your arts learning project activities that you're not asking for us to fund things that are one-on-one, like private lessons. And instead, if it's something that is a one-on-many and really emphasizing that hands-on art making experiences with a group, those projects should be eligible. And if you have any questions about that, you're welcome to reach out to Sogan, myself, or Stephanie to advise you on your application. And yeah, we've seen all sorts of wonderful projects with the Arts Learning Project grant, bringing teaching artists into schools, into community centers, performances that have an educational component. There's a lot of different ways that you can spin this, and I would definitely make sure to read through the grant guidelines where a lot of your questions will be answered about what is allowable and what is not. We've seen that this this grant can fund individual programs, or in some cases, several programs or a series of programs. So this is a really exciting grant because, again, it is our biggest grant, and it's one of the few grants that I can think of in Nevada for arts education specifically. And so we're excited to be able to support teaching artists and other organizations to bring in more arts and to help close the gap and make sure that everybody is getting access to arts education in Nevada. Is there another slide for ALP? Okay, let's see. So grant funds may only be used for the following: teaching artist fees, production artist fees, including directors, videographers, costume designers, etc., materials or supplies, facility rental fees, equipment relevant to the project up to $1,000, including video cameras, microphones, software, video communication subscriptions. So that's definitely something to keep in mind, that if you are purchasing equipment with the funds that you receive from us, you need to make sure that it is under $1,000. And then the grant award amount is subject to change based on the available funding. So for Arts Learning Project, who's eligible to apply for Arts Learning Project? Number one is nonprofit organizations. Stephanie, were you going to say something? Is that what you popped back on?
Yeah, for some reason I thought I was going to do this slide, but was
Oh
it
yeah,
maybe
feel
you?
free. It might be better if you do it, but either way.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So
Okay.
the grants team usually handles screening for eligibility. And I know that we've mentioned this a couple times, but just to make sure that you're aware of the eligibility requirements for yourself as an entity, in this case for nonprofits. So as we said, so this grant is open to any nonprofit organization conducting an arts education program. So you don't have to have the arts in your mission in order to apply. It's open to all nonprofit organizations. You must either be based in Nevada or in a border state. If you are in a border state, 75% of the project must be dedicated to Nevada residents, and all of our awarded funds must be used to support those activities in Nevada. You have to have that federal tax exempt status as a 501c3, including being in good standing with the IRS. You have to have active incorporation status with the Nevada Secretary of State, and we do check that at the time of application. And just to note, for those nonprofit organizations that are on the teaching artist roster, you may apply for either the Arts Learning Project Grant or the Arts Learning Express Grant. For public institutions, which we spoke about a little bit in terms of public schools, libraries, and colleges, but there is far more than that. That includes federally recognized tribes, state or local government, schools, public libraries, and institutions of higher education. Those public institutions, unlike nonprofits, must be based in Nevada, cannot be in border states. And agencies that are within that same governmental entity are eligible to apply independently with some stipulations. They have to have different or distinct mission statements, their own separate advisory boards, and multiple departments and facilities with one agency may not apply independently. So again, that's for governmental entities. Colleges and universities are limited to no more than one grant in the same academic department, and individual schools and libraries within the same district or system may apply independently as long as they have their own budget and facilities. So, make sure that you're reading all of the eligibility criteria to make sure that your entity is eligible to apply. The application for the Arts Learning Project Grant, just to give you an idea of what to prepare, though of course you can go and look right now. There will be an eligibility screening form, which is new this year, just to make sure that you are eligible before starting the application. We do our best to try to make sure that is clear, and we do have to thoroughly screen every application for eligibility once it gets to us, but hopefully that eligibility form helps. Once you get to the main application, you can expect to answer narrative questions about your project, pretty detailed questions about your project, your mission as an organization, your history as an organization, who will be managing the project, what staff, There is a budget table to tell us what you will do specifically with our grant funds if you are awarded. And there's also a full project table where you put in all of your expenses for the project, whether they would be covered by the grant or not, all the expenses for the project, all the income for the project, and all of the in-kind contributions if applicable. Income would include your grant from us, and any cash donations or real cash, real money that's going to your project. Whereas in kind could include contributions, as Shireen mentioned, the kind of value calculated from donated supplies, donated times, etc. And we're happy to talk more about that in the Q&A. You, of course, have to share a little bit about the teaching artists that are going to be involved in your project, including how you select them, and share artistic work samples from those artists or from the project or similar projects. And there is a space to add additional support material, things like marketing and publicity samples, evaluation forms, contracts, letters of agreement, or any printed materials from your organization or in preparation for the project. So that's kind of what you can expect in the application. But again, it is open now. Go take a look. It never hurts to open it up and get a sense of what you need as early as possible. Okay. And I think, Shireen, we were going to have you pop on and talk a little bit about some of the project requirements. And there was one thing I wanted to mention too, actually. We were talking about the hands-on portion of the arts learning project. This is a question that has come up a couple of times, and hopefully the guidelines as we revise them this year will help. But it is okay if your project for the arts learning project grant is more about arts exposure. So that's where that educational programming or performances comes in. But it is, yeah, to be careful of exactly what Shireen said about the workshops. Make sure they're not private lessons and one-on-one. Those workshops and lessons, do need to have that hands-on component. But it is okay to have that educational or the arts education exposure, arts exposure, educational programming as well.
Definitely. Okay, so going a little bit more into what kinds of projects are good for the Arts Learning Project Grant. So project requirements. Number one, we ask that you have a qualified teaching artist leading the project. So projects must engage a qualified teaching artist. A qualified teaching artist is a practicing professional artist with demonstrated expertise in an art form and the complementary skills of an educator who can effectively engage a wide range of people in learning experiences in, through, and about the arts. So really what we're asking here is that the person that you are proposing or the people that you're proposing that will lead this project has at least some experience. We want to know that they have some teaching experience, in particular teaching in the kinds of settings that they're going to be going to. So if you're suggesting that this program is going to happen at a school, do they have other experiences leading programs at a school? Or do they, if the program is going to happen at a community center, have they led other programs at a community center? We just want to see that they have some experience teaching the art form that they have some sense of competency or mastery over. So this is not a great fit for someone who's brand new at teaching. So we just want you to have at least some experience. And if you don't have that, then I recommend going out and getting some teaching artist experience first so that you can include that in your application and it will just make your application that much more strong. So number one is that we are asking for projects from and utilizing qualified teaching artists within our community. Number two, area of focus. Whether designed for a school or a non-school environment, eligible activities must address one or more of the following areas of focus. Number one, arts education. Number two, arts integration. Number three, arts for social development. And number four, therapeutic arts. So if your project can fit into any of these categories, that's great. And if not, then how can you rework whatever it is that you're proposing to us so that it more strongly aligns with one or more of these categories? Panelists will evaluate all applications using the criteria below. Project design and content, 25 points. Project management, 25 points. Artistic excellence, 25 points. Arts learning impact / artistic merit, 25 points. So once we receive your application, we're going to review it for eligibility, and then it's going to go to a panel review where we will have experts in the field, so other arts educators and teaching artists from the state of Nevada mostly, but sometimes from other places too. And they will review all of the applications that in everything you include in your application, from your work samples to your letters of recommendation. And they're going to be reviewing it based on this rubric right here. And the more points you have, the more funding that you will likely get. So the stronger your application, the better, to ensure that you can get as much funding as possible. So these are the things that we're going to be reviewing on. So definitely be sure to take a look at this and align your answers and align your application to these items that we're going to be scoring for. Section A, project design and content, 25 points. Clearly describes achievable goals, objectives, and learning outcomes. Clearly describes proposed educational content, including aligning them to the Nevada State content standards for fine arts or English language arts, social studies. I could see a world if you're doing arts integration where you may bring in other standards, and all of those standards are listed online, so you can go and take a look, and we will ask which standards your application is aligning to. So definitely make sure to take a look at those. As well as includes a plan to assess and evaluate learning in arts and/or culture. And the project is well designed with a realistic timeline. So we're really looking for feasibility here. Like, can you accomplish what you say you're going to accomplish in the amount of time that you say that it's going to take? And then as an educator, we're always wanting to see those achievable goals, learning objectives, and learning outcomes. So we're going to ask you to think through all these things in your application. Section B, project management, demonstrates organizational capacity to complete the proposed project, involves qualified personnel to plan and manage the project, provides a clear budget with appropriate financial resources to support the project. So again, we want to make sure that you're going to be able to pull off what you're proposing and make sure that there's qualified people who are going to be supporting the project, your budget makes sense, and that the organization that you're partnering with has the capacity, is aware that this program is going to happen. We're going to be looking for all of those things to ensure that this program is a success. Section C is artistic excellence, 25 points, utilizes an effective process to select qualified teaching artists and art educators who demonstrate experience leading successful programs within a similar setting as the proposed project. We already discussed that. Demonstrates teaching artists' experience and success in the project's artistic medium, and illustrates a commitment to nurturing artistic development and self-expression. So these are all the things we're looking for to qualify your artistic excellence or the artistic excellence of the program. Yep, pretty self-explanatory there. And arts learning impact, artistic merit is section D, also 25 points. Clearly identifies and defines the target participant and/or audience, demonstrates a marketing and promotional plan for reaching target audience participants and/or the audience, or target participants and audience, and addresses specific challenges or needs of that target participants or audience, and demonstrates a commitment to inclusion and accessibility. So we are wanting to know who it is that this project is serving and what are the specific needs or challenges that this program is designed to meet the needs of that audience. And yeah, just making sure that the program is accessible and inclusive and that those questions are thought through in the application process.
Okay, thanks so much, Shireen. So we're going to talk about Arts Learning Express now and go to Sogand.
Thank you so much, Shireen and Stephanie. Yeah, I'm going to talk about Arts Learning Express grant, which is a grant designed to support short-term arts education programming. Um, the grant amount is up to $2,000, and for this grant, we are not asking for a match, so no match is required. This grant is based on it's a rolling basis grant, meaning that we split fiscal year into two cycles. Cycle A is from the beginning of fiscal year, July 1st to December 31st of 2025. And cycle B starts on January 1st through June 30th of 2026. And as I mentioned, it supports short-term arts education programming, and this grant is open to community organizations and public institutions, as well as individuals on a teaching artist roster, individual teaching artists on the teaching artist roster. And to offer flexibility and expedite funding, ALX grants are awarded on a first come, first serve basis for each cycle. And grants funds are limited, so we encourage early submission, and you have to submit your application at least 30 days before the programming happens. And just a disclaimer here that eligible applicants can receive up to 2 ALX grants per fiscal year, but only 1 ALX grant per cycle. And that means that you can get 1 per each cycle. That's 2 per fiscal year, but you cannot receive 2 ALX grants, for example, in cycle A. And in order to apply and receive the second ALX grant, the final report for the first grant must be submitted. And that's a requirement. So funds from this grant may only be used for teaching artist fees, materials and supplies, and travel to accommodate and to provide accommodations and transportation only. So no per diem food and drink can be paid with this grant. And this grant is available based upon available funding. Okay, Stephanie, you wanna?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in here and talk a little bit again about applicant eligibility. So for the Arts Learning Express grant, we have a number of different entities that can apply, as we've said. For individual teaching artists, specifically, this means Nevada Arts Council teaching roster artists. So this application, the Arts Learning Express grant, if you are the primary applicant, submitting the application, you have to be on the Nevada Arts Council teaching roster in order to be eligible to apply. In addition to that, and we do screen these things at the time of application, for the teaching artist roster itself, you have to be a current Nevada resident. By law, that means that you've been in residence for at least 1 year prior to the date of the grant application. Most people show that with their driver's license, or including their previous driver's license if it's a recently issued one, just to show that continuity of residency. You have to be a U.S. citizen or have legal permanent resident status. That is for all of our grants. You must be at least 21 years old, and you must not be enrolled as a degree-seeking student in a field related to the type of grant for which you are applying. In our case, that means in an arts-related field. So keep that in mind. If you are not eligible at the time because you are enrolled as a degree-seeking student, you will be eligible upon graduation. If you are an artist working in a group, so if you are one of those informal groups that is on the teaching artist roster, you just have to have one individual be the primary applicant. They must meet all of the above listed criteria, and they would file one application on the behalf of your informal group. So that is for groups that are on the Nevada Arts Council teaching roster that are not nonprofit organizations. So just informal groups, artist collective, artists working together. If you are a public institution or a 501c3 nonprofit that is applying for the Arts Learning Express grant to bring in a teaching artist or to utilize a teaching artist in your organization, the eligibility requirements are that you must be based in Nevada. This is something that we look for on your IRS form, the 990. You have to have that federal tax exempt status as a 501c3. You have to have your UEI from SAM.gov. You have to be actively incorporated with the Nevada Secretary of State. And just so that you're aware of the pairing that a organization may receive either an Arts Learning Express grant or an Arts Learning Project grant in the same fiscal year, not both. So those are our current kind of restrictions on the kind of combinations that you can put these two grants together with. In the application, you can expect a few things. You'll have to indicate the relevant Nevada academic content status for your project. That's for K through 12 projects. Your area of focus. So you'll see that these are actually the same as in the Arts Learning Project grant: arts education, arts integration, social development, therapeutic arts. Narrative questions throughout the application include things such as the project details, your objectives and your methods for the project, your organization's mission and history, project management staff, participating artist selection, and participating artist biographies. If you were an individual applying, you would not have to detail the mission or history. Excuse me. You would have a table with your programming contact hours. Remember, it's 4 minimum, 20 maximum. Yes, excuse me, 4 minimum, 20 maximum. I thought I messed that up, but I got it right the first time. You will tell us how you'll use the grant funding. Again, that is new this year. Previously, you could only use them for teaching artist fees, but you have a little more options with your funding this fiscal year. You'll tell us about your full project, the income, expenses, and in kind. You'll share artistic work samples and upload any additional support materials such as marketing and publicity samples, all the things that we mentioned before, any of that relevant support material that shows the capacity of yourself as an individual or organization to complete the project, or relevant materials to the project. Okay, so I'll have Zogan come back on and talk a little bit about that internal review process for Arts Learning Express.
Thank you, Stephanie. So this grant does not go through panel review, but it goes through internal review. And here's our review process and the criteria that we use to assess the applications. So we will review for eligibility, completeness, and adherence to project requirements that I'm going to talk about in a second. The project must demonstrate artistic excellence and artistic merit, which include the following. The applicant should demonstrate the project is interactive and hands-on. It should include clear objectives and achievable outcomes. It should demonstrate connections to Nevada content standards for fine arts and or English language arts and social studies, and that's the requirement for projects that are for pre-K through 12 schools only. The application should address one of the followings, either the project targets arts education or arts integration or arts for social development or therapeutic art making. At least one of these must be targeted with the project. Skill level must be appropriate for target audience. And the application for the project should include a clear plan to evaluate the success of the arts learning programming. And also should involve qualified teaching artists and group to handle and lead the projects. The project must provide a clear schedule, and including educational contact hours. Again, 4 hours is the minimum and 20 hours is maximum to be eligible for this grant. And the project must also demonstrate an authentic and collaborative commitment to inclusion and accessibility. which this here's it's linked in our website. You can find that page on our website. So these are the criteria that we use to review applications as we receive them. Again, this is a rolling basis application grant. So, and the programming requirements include it should demonstrate that it's an active hands-on project, and it provides hands-on educational experience in the arts or traditional cultural practices to the learners. Supplementary activities such as reading, lecture, demonstrations, performances may accompany the project, but it shouldn't be exceeding more than 20% of the total programming contact hours. So be very careful of that. This grant is it's really focused on the hands-on learning and the hands-on educational arts educational programming for the learners. A teacher or an adult representative of the sponsoring organization must be present at all time during the programming. During the program, and if the artist is working with a larger group of pre-K through 12 students, the adult and the student ratio must be appropriate to the activity. So that's something to keep in mind, especially for those folks who apply for this grant to go to schools and have programming, arts learning programming for the schools. And again, as a reminder again, the minimum of contact hours must be 4 hours, and 20 hours is the maximum for the contact hours for receiving the ALX grant fundings.
Okay, so hopefully we've helped to kind of share a little bit about what distinguishes the Arts Learning Project Grant from the Arts Learning Express Grant. In a nutshell, in addition to all of the things that we have discussed, the Arts Learning Project Grant really is about those, larger scale projects, and that is in part why it is open to nonprofits and public institutions. Whereas the Arts Learning Express grants are a little more flexible, they're a little more nimble. They can be used for those short-term arts education programming in different settings, whether that's in communities or in public schools. We do want to do a little plug here because we are kind of doing a little tour around the state. We've already completed a number of workshops across the northern part of the state in Carson, Fallon, Fernley, Reno, and Elko. And we have 2 upcoming workshops at the end of this week in Lovelock and Winnemucca. So if you know anyone up north who is in those communities or near those communities that would like to come meet us and hear a little spiel about all of our grants, including arts learning, please let them know. You can we're also going down to Southern Nevada, Tonopah, Pahrump, North Vegas, two workshops in Las Vegas and one in Henderson. So we are going to be out and around. And you can find information about that on our website. If you go to our main page and scroll down just a little bit to the recent news section, there is an article that has information on these grants informational sessions, including things like a registration link, if you are interested. I think that is all that we have. So we can definitely take questions now. And I did just want to do a little plug too, because we didn't talk about the teaching artist roster in depth in this presentation, but we are planning to, as we did last year, have a webinar on the teaching artist roster later on down in the year before it opens. I imagine it closes October 27th, and is open for 2 months. So it opens at the end of August. So please look out for that if you are thinking of joining the teaching artist roster. That is an annual application. So if you are thinking about it, we would encourage you to apply this year. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Are there any questions from any of our participants? Please put them in the Q&A or raise your hand. We'll monitor the chat and the participants. You can ask your question in any form that you would like. Okay, not seeing any questions. And if you don't want to ask questions here, that is fine. You are more than welcome to reach out with our contact information. Again, the Arts Learning Project Grant is currently accepting applications now. Please take a look if you're interested. The Arts Learning Express will open up May 1st of this year for projects for Cycle A starting July 1 through December 31st. And the Teaching Artist roster is going to open for applications at the end of August and close on October 27th. Very, very similar to what it did last year.
We
Oh, we've
have
got
a couple
one.
of questions that came through in the Q&A.
Sure.
So Sherry said, can you do an Arts Learning Express project in 2 parts in 2 respective cycles?
Mhm. I think that we'd have to hear a little bit more information about that, Sherry. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, kind of like a 2-part series of a workshop? I mean, maybe it's possible. I think we would have to read a little bit about the program itself. We do have a general funding restriction on funding the same project twice. Um, but on
Sherry added how to write a memoir, part A and part B.
write a memoir, part A and part B. Yeah, I think we'd have to talk about it as a group, which is often the case. We do have to consider um, all of the rules and all of the guidelines, including our general grant and award policies, which I really encourage everyone to go read when they have a chance. It's a bit of a lengthy document, but it does help to give a sense of generally across the board what is restricted. Um, yeah, Sherry, I would say maybe send us a description of how you see that project working. Generally speaking, we have asked, because of that general funding restriction, that projects be pretty distinct. Um, so I'd have to see, yeah, a description of those. So I would say just email us a description of the part A and part B, and we can kind of see if there's a way that it might be eligible. Okay, thanks, Sherry.
But if they were, just to clarify, if they were 2 separate workshops that were both about memoir writing and they weren't necessarily contingent on the other, that would be more allowable, I think.
Yeah, I think so. But I think that because we evaluate each project individually, I think we'd want to see the description first. And of course, eligibility is based on the whole application. So we can take a look at your proposed project and give you, encourage you to apply if we think it's eligible, but we still have to read the entire application for eligibility. So just a disclaimer that, even if we look it over, we still have to review the entire application before we can determine whether or not it's eligible.
Great. Next question from Joan. Thank you. Is it acceptable for a member of the teaching artist roster to collaborate with a qualifying nonprofit to apply, meaning to support the application of the nonprofit?
Yeah, there's no issue with that. Yeah, if you are a member of the roster and you're working with a nonprofit, I'm guessing this is for the Arts Learning Express grant. That's fine. It's just whomever wants to be the primary applicant, frankly. Because if you're an individual on the teaching artist roster, you are eligible to apply directly. If you are a nonprofit, you are eligible to apply directly. So yeah, it's a good question. And for the arts learning project, this question came up last year. The question of whether or not the qualified teaching artists needed to be on the teaching artist roster for the arts learning project. That is not the case. They do not have to be on the roster. They just have to have those qualifications as an educator and an artist. Let us know if that didn't answer your question, Joan. That's a good question.
Okay, great. I think that's all of our questions so far. Oh, Joan said, great, thanks.
Thanks, Joan.
Well, here's another one. Will the NEA/Nevada Arts Council be impacted by any of the recent events trends having to do with federal grants and federal funding?
Yeah, thanks for your question, Sherry. I think, like a lot of agencies, do not yet know. So we will have to wait and see. Of course, it is always a possibility. Any other questions? Oh, wow. We are like um even early a little bit. Okay. All right. I'm not seeing any other questions. So maybe we can go ahead and call it a day. We are going to put this up on our YouTube for your reference or to reference others to. And please do not hesitate to reach out at any stage should you have any follow-up questions at all. We appreciate everyone coming.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Sherry. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.